Hello and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. My name is Matthew Kelly. I work in the marketing team at RM, and joining us today are two of my RM colleagues, Mel Parker, who manages our education consultants team, and also Michael Oakes, who's our product manager for managed services at RM. The third person you'll be hearing from is Lauren Thorpe, who's Chief Transformation Officer at United Learning. They'll each tell you a little bit more about their work as the presentation goes along. Before we get into the slides, I have a couple of housekeeping topics to address. Firstly, the session is being recorded, and we'll send you a link to the recording along with a brief feedback survey tomorrow morning. There should be time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. So please submit any questions that you have using the Q&A function, which you should be able to find at the top of the Teams window, whether you're using the Teams app or in a web browser, and we'll cover as many of those as we get time for. This is a rerun of a session that Lauren, Mel and Michael presented at the Confederation of School Trusts annual conference last year. That's why the slides are using the CST annual conference design. The content is largely the same, although we've made some updates to take account of recent developments in what I'm sure you know is a very fast-moving field. There are a couple of opportunities for audience participation via an app called Slido. To get involved, you'll need to use a smartphone or other similar device to scan a QR code, which will appear on screen at the relevant point, and that takes you to the Slido webpage for this presentation. And with that, I will hand you over to Michael.
Thanks, Matthew, and thanks for joining us, everyone. So just before we get into the presentation, I'm going to explain a bit about who RM Technology are for those of you that don't know us. We've been around 50 years. People know us for various different things. What are we today? We're a services company, we're a hardware company, we are a broadband provider, and we're a software company. So we work with around 6,000 schools. 53% of those are transacting with large strategic trusts. We're supporting around 4 million students and 1.5 million daily users of our RM Unified platform. We've been around a while. We've changed a fair bit from what some people might remember us as, so really just to highlight some of the stuff we do. We also work with some of the key providers of technology into businesses, but also education. So on this slide, you can see who we work with. We're also ISO accredited. We've got a number of accreditations there as well in the work that we do. Okay, without further ado, let's head straight into a Slido. So these are some of the responses that we got from the CST conference. We'd really like to see some more thoughts around your one word to describe your thoughts on AI. So I'll give you a minute or so to get that QR code and start to update this. Try not to be influenced by what people have already said. Okay. Definitely opportunity. Yes, I would agree with that. Potential. It's interesting actually that scary seems to be getting smaller. So I wonder whether people are, getting more familiar with what AI can do and less worried about, how it might have adverse effects. Bewildering. That's a good word. It's a good word. Hopefully, we're going to help make things a little bit clearer on how AI works and how you can utilize it. So I'm going to be talking more around uncovering sort of the basics of AI to help you get a bit more au fait with some of the terminology used. That's the starter, and then we're going to work through and we'll be talking through different uses within education and really how you can start to implement that. Some great stuff that Lauren's learned over the time of her implementing things at her trust. So hopefully this is going to be really helpful to help unbewilder some people and show you where that exciting opportunity and potential can be reached. So what is AI? I'm going to start off really basic here. When thinking about AI, many of us will know the most advertised and talked about tools. So these are Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude as well. Often these tools we have on our devices already. So you may already be using these. These tools are what is known as generative AI assistants that can help with things like writing text, answering questions, doing maths, generating outlines and drafts, proofreading work, providing research resources, creating videos, and generating code. So it can save us a huge amount of time. Some of these tools are free to use, but a word of caution around that is that no fee to pay doesn't mean you aren't giving them something that they can monetize. So always think along those lines, and I'll talk more about that in my section about how that works. Broadly speaking, providing you're careful about what you put in, this doesn't pose too much of a threat. There are paid options that give you more control over the way in which they work as well. So when we look a little bit deeper, AI is a much broader field than just these assistant tools. A simple search brings up numerous AI products that can help with, so some of the ones on this slide can help with research, video creation and editing, music creation and editing, note-taking, writing, grammar and writing improvement, search engines, social media management, image generation, graphic design, app building and coding, project management, scheduling, customer service, and voice generation. So there's a huge array of these AI tools out there. And with a lot of the noise around AI, we're seeing schools and businesses as well being put under a lot of pressure to open up access to it. We'll talk more about later about how you can approach this. There are conflicting narratives around what AI can do for us and the adverse effects it may have. Being informed about what AI actually is will help you in making decisions around the use of AI in your schools and trusts. So I'm going to talk now a bit about the very basic levels of what AI is and what it isn't. So AI is a bit of an amorphous term that can be used to describe all sorts of tools and processes. And if you recently attended BET, you would have seen lots and lots of companies talking about AI. And when you delve into it, they're doing very different things. So let's take it back a step and start to think about what is AI. In simple terms, AI is used to discover new information, infer from data you or it has, or reason, adding information together to produce a new idea. Understanding what is happening, even at a high level, is important because these systems can use the information you give them to learn and grow. Now, what are the details within this? There are many different ways you can cut this. So I've taken this approach to help illustrate the ways this break down, because there's lots of terms that are used within AI that sometimes it's difficult to unpick exactly what we're talking about. So technically, AI is a superset that includes machine learning and deep learning. These are systems to work together to decipher information, make decisions, and produce predictions. So artificial intelligence, these are things like natural language processing. They can work on vision. So I've talked about video editing and image editing. They do text to speech. They'll also do motion work as well. Within that, you then have machine learning. Now, you have a couple of different ways to do machine learning. So machine learning is a sophisticated form of statistical analysis. So you use various statistical models to make decisions. These are things like decision trees, logistic regression, and linear regression, and lots of other models. So it may use multiples. It'll be looking for predictions based on what we have. So what the information is it's pointed at. The more we feed in, the more it knows, and it learns instead of being coded. And then when we get into deep learning, these models interact and perform unsupervised learning. So you've got semi-supervised learning, which is a combination of supervised and unsupervised learning. Self-supervised learning, which generates implicit labels from unstructured data rather than relying on labeled data sets. Reinforcement learning, which learns by trial and error, and reward functions by extracting information from hidden patterns. Transfer learning, where knowledge gained from one task or data set is used to improve a model performance or another task or a different data set. So you can, within this, you might have a model within an AI tool that looks at a very specific set of data and then returns information from it. So if we think about things like Copilot, you can buy versions of Copilot and pay for it and produce those to look at specific information. So it only ever looks in that area and you can ring fence that information. You can also get involved and take tools that might look at a larger, wider set of data, or might even start looking out on the internet. And if that's unsupervised and it's starting to look all over the place, that might bring back some interesting results. So it's worth thinking about exactly what kind of AI tool you're using when you're going to implement it and what you're using it for. At the top level, an AI application will take a prompt, decide how it needs to be dealt with, how to deal with the request, process that information through multiple layers of deep learning, and then output a response. While that's a simple process, the devil's in the detail of how a prompt is inputted. So you might often see in social media people talking about these are the prompts, the killer prompts that you need to be able to get AI doing a certain thing. Very much what you put in will determine what comes out, and then how it's interpreted and how deep learning deciphers this. So deep learning is reasonably complex, but we'll try and break down what deep learning does, again, at a very top level. So it uses weighting to decide how to predict an output. So a simple explanation, an example of this might look like this. So in the example here, the question may be, should I go surfing today? And X1 looks at the expected weather conditions. X2 will look at how busy the beach will be today. And X3 will look at the likelihood of a shark attack. These might have binary answers. So X1 would say 0 is rough, 1 is fair. X2 will say 0 is not busy and 1 is busy. X3 will say 0 is likely there's going to be a shark attack, 1 unlikely there's going to be a shark attack. Now, the algorithm will assess the information that it has access to and score these factors. It will also weight the answers based on what it knows about my skills in rough weather, whether I'm confident surfing in a crowd, and my fear of sharks. So it might decide, actually, Michael's quite confident surfing in crowded and rough weather, but has an absolute fear of sharks. So because there's a possibility of there being a shark around, we wouldn't take that in. From that, this node will make some predictions around whether or not I should go surfing. So deep learning models are, of course, a bit more complex than this. So if we look at how that then starts to break down and how a neural network, as they're called, will start to process this. So one of these nodes will then sit in this multiple hidden layer. So it's more than some binary weighted decisions. As the name suggests, these models learn. They're also known as neural networks, which I've touched on. So while one node might make some fairly basic predictions, in complex models, you will see multiple layers filtering and refining that information. They use different ML models, machine learning models, to statistically analyze the request and produce the best predictions of the answer. Each time we interact with these models, they can be configured to learn what was it the right response, what we need to change, and so on. So clearly that in there, I've said they can be configured to learn. Now, this is one of the things you can do with AI models, is you can decide whether it's going to learn or not, whether it's going to take information and build that into a database where it taps into. It's worth being aware of that, particularly if you're starting to get into heavier usage of it. But because of this, we can't easily work out how a deep learning model produces the information it does, because if you've got multiple layers within here, it's very difficult to look through and understand how it's ended up where it's ended up. So as these nodes are learning to make connections like a human brain on the fly, it means we are not fully in control of the way the output is formed. And that is why we need to be careful about how and when we use AI. So particularly when we're starting to look at using this to give us data, we need to make sure that we're looking and understanding how that data works. So I'll explain a bit more about some of the stuff that can happen within AI models. Hallucinations. So this is an AI term. And given these models are looking in multiple locations, predicting complex responses, it does have room for error. So just like a human brain, if the information it has to go on is incomplete or has been corrupted, then the output results can be wrong. So these errors are referred to as hallucinations in AI, and they can be factually incorrect. So, for example, the response gives an incorrect date for a historical event because it's looking at information that's wrong. Or they can be statistically inaccurate. So something I've come across a number of times when asking AI to help me build spreadsheets and put formulas into spreadsheets is that it's given me a formula that on the face of it looks like it's right, but when you put it in, it doesn't work. And then I've spent, an hour going backwards and forwards with AI to try and unpick these formulas because actually they've got it wrong. So statistically inaccurate. These hallucinations can happen either intentionally. So this is where threat actors inject malicious data into your data. Again, if you're not heavily using AI and you're not building these models yourselves, potentially there's less potential for that. Unintentionally, where large data volumes of unlabeled data could have conflicting information or misrepresentations or misleading or incomplete information. So there's a few different ways that hallucinations can happen, as we can see, and it's worth being very aware of those when you're starting to look into how you can utilize AI. So what can you do to protect yourself against this? There's lots of information in this slide that I'll talk through. So, I mean, everything I've talked about is designed to make you think before you jump into AI. Okay, it's not to discourage you necessarily, and I'm really pleased to see that so many people are excited and see there's an opportunity. The tools are fantastic and can have a marked impact on productivity and efficiency, but it's also important to go in with your eyes open. So the key concerns at the top level around data security and output accuracy. So I've outlined some tips here so you can be better armed when going into using AI. So just around data security, if I step through these, choosing reputable providers, so looking for vendors with strong security measures, data privacy certifications, so things like ISO 27001. You also want them to have transparent data handling practices as well. Look for secure data transmission, so ensure data is encrypted during transmission to and from AI solution. Use secure protocols like HTTPS. To protect sensitive information, or don't put sensitive information in, which is another point within here. Data minimization, share only the necessary data with the AI solution. So avoid sending anything that you wouldn't want out there on the internet. Regular security audits, so stay informed about the vendor's security practices. Make sure you're assessing that on a fairly regular basis. Data access control, so limit access to sensitive data to authorized personnel within your organization. This is much more for the models when you're building stuff to sort of mine data within your own organization, but think about who's got access and be really clear on that. And then monitor for anomalies. So if you're taking data out and you're going to try and rely on it, you need to keep testing that and making sure that it is bringing out data that makes sense. That leads into output accuracy. So data quality, ensure that data fed into the AI solution is accurate, clean, and relevant. So if you're using data sets, make sure that those data sets are correct. Rubbish in, rubbish out, as they say. Model validation. Verify the AI model's accuracy and reliability through rigorous testing and validation. So if you're just buying into one of the tools I mentioned earlier, you may not need to go through this, but as you start to expand into wider use of it, these are the sorts of things you need to think about. Regular model updates, so make sure any AI model that you've got is up to date and has the latest patching and security put into it. Have some human oversight. Continuously train and refine the AI model. So if you're building one yourself, think about that. Also think about bias mitigation. So be aware of potential biases in the training data and model algorithms. Take steps to mitigate bias and ensure fair and equitable outcomes. These are some things to think about as you move forward. But what I would say, probably simpler at the stage most of the schools and trusts we're talking to, is chase the outcome and not the technology. So lots and lots of talk about AI at the moment. Don't feel you need to put AI in if you don't have a proper outcome for it. So think about reducing teacher workload and how you could do that, and be specific about the areas where you can do that. Think about how you can improve student outcomes through this and use the right tools in the right places and limit to that. Saving administration time the same, and look at increasing collaboration through these tools. But be specific about what the outcome is before you start then implementing AI. So I'm going to hand over to Mel now, and she's going to talk more about how we can start to put the uses into schools. So over to you, Mel.
Thank you, Michael. So I'm actually going to look at some of the latest documentation from the DfE, some research, and some potential ideas for classroom implementation. So I lead the educational consultancy team at RM, and my previous role was as a secondary maths teacher and deputy head and acting head of a school in Wolverhampton up to 3 years ago. So I like to think that I know what's happening in the classroom. I work extensively with schools and trusts on how they're using IT. So really just adding to what Michael said, the DfE have published a guidance on generative AI in education, and that was just last month, January 2025. It's readily available on their website. What they're saying is really think carefully about, again, what you're giving the LLMs and other generative AI to get the response you seek. Think about the personal data. So they're heavily talking about intellectual property rights, who owns the data that you're putting in, the guidance details around that. So things like if you're putting in students' essays, their homework, and things that you want to suggest marks for, that's actually intellectual property of the student. Things like lesson plans created by other teachers, again, thinking about the ownership of those. And permissions would need to be sought from students as the copyright owner, or in fact students, parents or guardians if the owner is below the age of consent. So really thinking about that intellectual property rights. They give some really good guidance on that. They also talk about something called secondary infringement. Schools and colleges should also be aware of this risk. This could happen if AI products are trained on unlicensed materials and outputs are then used in educational settings, so being careful with those things. Publishing a policy that has been created by an AI tool that used inputs taken from another school, for instance, would be an example of that. So if you're using an AI tool, have you checked the accuracy of the data and their practice, basically? So reiterating really what Michael's been saying. Thinking about governance of AI, again, the policy paper really just says to think about personal and special categories of data and how you protect them. There's also guidance from the JCQ that has been out now for 12 months regarding candidate use of AI. So there's lots in there that's available. And in your trust, are you giving clear expectations to your teachers and your students and the community around what is acceptable use of AI in your establishments? So I think that side of things, there are lots of now information to pull on. I know Lauren's going to be talking about that further, about how they've dealt with it in United Learning. So just pulling on some research EEF published in December last year. It is a limited evidence base, but actually it's a starting point. There have been very few research articles about actually teachers using it and how they use it. So this was 129 teachers in 35 schools who were allocated the use of ChatGPT in this case. Obviously, it could be other tools that are available. And a similar number were asked not to use any AI tools in the work that they were going to do. The group were given a guide to support them in how to implement ChatGPT, how to ask it questions, how to do those prompts that Michael's talked about. So they had 5 weeks to familiarise themselves with it, and then they were given weeks 6 to 10 to actually run the research. The guide is available. It's on that link at the bottom of the slide there. But basically, the teachers were creating questions, quizzes, activities, and ideas for tailoring existing materials for groups of students, for instance, putting some scaffolding into activities. It tended to be that teachers weren't creating whole lessons, but just 1 or 2 activities within their lessons. All the teachers were science teachers from years 7 and 8 classes, and 96% of them were science was their main subject for teaching, so subject specialists in that case. The evaluators found that the group of teachers who used the ChatGPT shaved off an average of 25 minutes from their weekly year 7 and 8 lesson planning compared to the comparison group of teachers. So the full report documents the impact, this impact reduced over time. So it was only a slight reduction, but it did reduce. All the lessons that were produced with the teachers that were using ChatGPT were also checked by an independent panel of teachers to check the standard and quality of them. The panel decided there was no noticeable difference in quality between the 2 groups. However, as I said, it was a limited sample. One thing that interested me about this study was that actually for some teachers, saving time didn't necessarily mean less time. However, for some of them, what it actually meant was that they could improve their teaching and improve their resources, and things that they were doing might not be able to do in a normal situation because of the time it would take them to do that. So the characteristic of saving time wasn't necessarily saving actual time, but actually improving on what their practice usually is. So I think that's an interesting concept in itself. These findings highlight the potential for the tools like ChatGPT to help address those stubborn issues of high workloads for teachers, but also possibly for how you can improve your teaching as a professional. As I've said, the guide for teachers is available. This was another piece of research that was done April 2024, so a little bit time ago now. But actually what I think is interesting about it is it's giving a template that you could potentially use in a school, in a classroom, about when it is appropriate to use AI. So we talk about teachers using AI, but also students using it. And sometimes students are left to use it rather than given firm direction on how to use it. So the scale goes from not using AI at all right the way down to using AI for the complete project. And therefore it's learning, teaching students about how to do prompts, but also the grades in between, I think, are really interesting in terms of how you could potentially use it in a classroom, make it really clear to students your expectations. It's also interesting to note that UCAS have provided guidance now, at least the last 12 months, in appropriate use of AI for students' applications through the UCAS system. So it's becoming more common, and therefore what guidance are we giving teachers to give our students in the classroom? So this guidance is really important. But for me, the one thing that I find really, really critical is that everyone, but students in particular, needs to be really able to critically evaluate digital media. It's a vital skill for everyone. So, as I said, I was a maths teacher, taught maths for over 20 years, and this is going to be a video. I apologise now, it's not something I enjoy watching, but this was done with a free AI tool. It took less than 30 minutes to create, and I just want to quickly play that to you.
Hello, my name is Mel. I have been a mathematics teacher for over 20 years. This is an avatar, and it can say anything that someone types into a text box. For example, I hate maths. Hello, my name is Mel.
You don't need to hear it twice, but that response I showed to my family, I've shown it to friends, and although they've watched it 2 or 3 times and say, that isn't quite your voice, actually we don't all sit and watch videos 2 or 3 times. We often watch a video, scan, move on, don't even finish watching a video. So you can see how really easy it is to produce a video of someone that actually looks like them, sounds pretty much like them, but could be saying something completely inaccurate. So that critical evaluation of digital media, that's why I think it's really important. I think also that this technology has a great uses, because actually if you, as a teacher, you video yourself, all you have to do is type in some text. You could be then producing small highlight revision videos, etc., for students. However, it's the flip side as well, so it's always measuring both sides of that
Hello,
coin.
my name.
So again, we just like you to open Slido again, if that's possible, and to think about whether you've communicated with parents at all about the use of AI. This came up just before the CST conference, where there was a case in Massachusetts in October last year, where parents of a high school student were suing a history teacher because their child had been punished for using AI to research and create an online create a history essay. So thank you for responding to that. It's good to see that some basic information has been sent out there. But I think it's something, again, when we're thinking about governance, is where else we should be communicating. Thank you for those responses. It's great to see that. Thank you. And you can see what the responses were from the CST conference. The DFE also have done some research into public attitudes about the use of AI in education. And I'm just going to quickly cover some of what they found. But basically, the questions were asked: under what circumstances would AI be suitable to be used in education? Well, would parents and pupils be comfortable with that situation? Under what circumstances, if any, are pupils and parents comfortable pupils' work to optimize performance tools? So what I was talking about before, really. So in terms of how it worked, was there was 108 people across the UK, and it was a mixture of face-to-face and online activities, and each participant took about 4 to 6 hours of their engagement to undertake this research. So the first stage was all about awareness, and it was really that parents had realised it was a hot topic, but they didn't understand, didn't run that deep in terms of their understanding. They associated it with robots or machines, social media, shopping in platforms and websites, really. So participants had used AI-powered tools, although not necessarily on purpose, not realising they were using them. So things like GPS, autocorrect, and predictive text. Modern life, in terms of that, they were thinking it's about modern life, a little bit uneasy about the perceived invasiveness of the technology, often easier to think of the risk rather than the benefits. And humans being replaced by machines scenario, that came out quite a lot from the initial baseline understanding. However, it didn't stop participants using and sharing their own data with services that offered them improved experiences based on machine learning. So interestingly, they had concerns, but their personal data was still being used. So parents hadn't really considered the application of AI tools in the education scenario, other than really for the issue of plagiarism. But pupils were saying it's a big part of their everyday lives and a natural extension of what there's already happening. So participants were informed about AI. They were given the key principles, similar to what Michael has shown you. And then there was a debate ensued in terms of looking at the social and ethical, legal and financial side of using AI tools. And at the end of it, each person was asked to, each person and each group were asked to articulate their preferred conditions and explore areas of consensus and difference. So across the workshop, parents and pupils felt most comfortable with teachers using AI as a tool to support lesson delivery. They were less comfortable with the idea of pupils engaging directly with AI tools, as they wanted to ensure some level of human oversight and pupil-teacher interaction. There was a higher level of comfort with AI when it was seen as enabling teachers to redirect their time and energy into delivering high quality education, but concerns of potential less human contact. In terms of the privacy of data, throughout the workshop, many participants expressed uncertainty over whether its current stage of development. AI was good enough to be used in an educational context. Is it good enough at this stage? Interestingly, the EEF report is taking us further on that journey. As participants became more informed about machine learning and how it works, more participants questioned the quality of the data. So again, the things we've already discussed, and AI and whether there would be sufficient human oversight to quality check AI outputs. So in terms of thinking about your trust and thinking about the governance side, and engagement and awareness, things really think about is there are many benefits from using AI. It's thinking about the other side of it as well. Thinking about the intellectual property needs to be a consideration about what inputs are going in. The safeguarding concerns are things like my video, but there's the flip side of that can be used really well. And then the critical evaluation of digital content. DFE in big bold print say safety should be at the top priority when deciding whether to use generative AI in your educational setting. So I think they've put that at the forefront, and hopefully some of the things that Michael and I have discussed will help prompt you on that. I'm going to hand over now to Lauren.
Hi everyone, afternoon. I think we'll skip the first couple of slides and get straight to the one that says what we think we know. So just mindful of time and hopefully give time for you to ask some questions. So I'm Lauren Thorpe, I'm the Chief Transformation Officer at United Learning. We're the largest trust in England, and we've been doing a lot of thinking around the role of AI. And my background, I'm a computer scientist by degree, so I've done a little bit of work on AI a long time ago, over 20 years ago now. But I think what's really important here in terms of the context and in terms of what we think we know is that there are not really any experts in this space. Even the world experts in this space say they don't know what's going to happen next. And so I think for us as trust leaders and school leaders, we've got to sort of work out what we want our role to be within this space as it changes so quickly. And already it was 3 months ago since we did this presentation at the CST annual conference. I'm going to be saying slightly different things, and there are things on these slides which already feel a little bit out of date that I haven't yet updated. So we know that it's moving fast. We know that there are going to be clear opportunities. There are also going to be risks. And I think important as trust leaders is for us to make sure that we understand those risks and that we don't rush in without ensuring that we fully mitigated them. And the other thing that I would encourage everyone is to think about is just to sort of ignore that we all feel, this fear of missing out. As we see other people pushing forward and trying and innovating new things with AI. I do not believe that there's a particularly strong first mover advantage for us as education leaders to push on with AI at pace if we're risking safeguarding and all of the sort of information security and governance that we need to have in place first. So sort of learn what's going on, proceed with caution, and look at opportunities where you think, we're calling them sort of placing bets on things. And I can talk a little bit about where we're doing that. So next slide, please. Thank you, Mel. What we don't know in this fast moving environment is how good the AI is going to get and how quickly. We've seen it's improving dramatically, even just in the last 3 or 4 months. We're seeing things dripping into into things like Copilot and Microsoft that used to be paid for products that are now free products because they're baked in to the packages that you're buying every day. And so here, we don't know how much this is going to cost us, but it's already we're seeing, and you'll be seeing when you're going out and buying things, if it's got an AI technology in it, sometimes that's a premium, or they've got a premium and a free version, and you get access to better AI models if you pay more. But what's likely to happen there is that at the frontier and at the edge, there's always going to be the things that are slightly more expensive because you're getting a slightly better version of generative AI. And over time, that will trickle down. So all of our products will sort of level up over time that we're using. And we need to think about what that means and how we're using the technology, and to the extent to which we're encountering AI invisibly, we already are in lots of tools that we use in our phones, across other sort of things we'll be doing online and spending time using. They are using our data and using our personal information to help us and know those agents. But there's a trade-off there, and we need to understand what it is that is being used. As Mel pointed out, our personal protection of our personal data and the copyrighted information, all of the content that our schools and trusts produce and teachers produce is all copyright protected, and we need to think about what that means in practice. So next slide. In terms of what we and we'll skip over this one because I just think there we go, what can trust do well. We've thought about this really hard because we want to make sure that we don't stifle innovation in schools. We want teachers and leaders to be able to experiment with different AI tools, but it's really important to us that they do that safely. So as a trust, we've taken the position that the things that we can do well have a clear vision around our use of AI. And I have to say that that's changing all the time as we see for us to think about where we might want to use AI across the group. But we do know that we can do the heavy lifting on safeguarding policies, acceptable use policies, DPIAs, which need updating if those edtech companies and partners are changing their use of your data. You need to update your DPIA so you understand what it is that they're doing. Ethical use, copyright increasingly. We are trying to put all of the parameters and guidance in place so that if schools want to innovate and they want to try new things, they understand that they're doing that in a safe and stable way. And I describe this as going bowling with the bumpers up. So we want them to be able to do what they want to do, but please try and do it with those safeguards in mind. And we're trying to find increasing ways of making that sort of quick, easy rules of thumb that people can have in their minds when they're thinking about using the technology, so it becomes common practice. Other things that we're doing are providing training and support. So we've built a sort of AI toolkit, which has got lots of guidance in for leaders, and we've done some training. Increasingly, we're trying to share case studies and recommendations of tools, but there is so much out there. There's a lot of rubbish, and there are a lot of things that we don't want people using, or that we don't want them integrating into our core ecosystem. So lots of these sort of listening tools, or the tools where, we've got some of them here in the meeting, sort of note-taking tools, things that can help read your emails. Really important that you look at where the data is being held. What is the scope of the data that is being held? How long are they holding it for? Can they move that data outside of the EU or a GDPR compliant country without your permission? These are all things that you would want to have a good grip on and just be aware of when you're deciding whether or not to implement something new in your trust. And finally, we're making some sort of big bets, as we call them, sort of central investment in AI tools where we think they're going to make a difference for the whole trust. The next slide. I've talked a little bit about some of these things already. So you can see there's a diagram on the right of some of the things that we've included in our sort of what we're calling our AI toolkit. We've updated acceptable use policies so that refresher when staff come in at the start of the year and sort of remind themselves of all of the things we expect in terms of their acceptable use of technology. It includes things like copyright and IP, so that they're aware. We've also launched this year a sort of internal digital marketplace of apps. And so we've sort of cyber checked those, we've DPIA checked those, and increasingly we've now got a list of things that are sort of blocked apps almost, so things that we don't want teachers and leaders in our schools to be using, and our IT teams across our schools are aware of that so that they don't install or integrate those apps for them on their behalf, where we just don't think that they're safe enough. And we're doing quite a lot of work on preparing our infrastructure. So a lot of work around thinking about what's the data landscape that we need to have. How are we thinking about data quality? Michael at the very beginning talked about how that sort of all of that data that you hold is used, and then quite, binary decisions are being made about that data a few steps back. If your data is not accurate, those decisions are going to be made incorrectly. And so things, even in your MIS, where you're looking at pupil characteristics, for example, you might want to be thinking about ensuring that all of that information is up to date, so that if you then start to do some more predictive analytics in future, you know that the insights are going to be drawn on accurate information. And on the site, on head teachers, we've really spent most of our time so far talking and thinking about safeguarding. So we've done a workshop with our head teachers at our annual conference last year, where we looked at all of the potential risks that now emerge in light of more access to AI and generative AI, and what have leaders got in place to mitigate some of those risks. And it's really clear to say that slide says what we are doing and not what have we done, because all of this is a work in progress, and all of it is changing over time. So on the next slide, I'm just going to reiterate this point around laying foundations for the future, and also placing some bets on things that we think are going to make a difference within our trust. So the data infrastructure I've spoken about, being much more explicit about the software that we want schools to be using. So we have a sort of taxonomy where some things are core. We expect all of our schools to be using those because we know they're really robust, they're really safe, they're really effective and impactful. And then we've got sort of space around the edges where we sort of approve things for use because we know that they'll either have a positive impact on student outcomes, or we believe that they save teachers time. On information governance, we've been doing lots and lots of work across our tenancy and all of our documents and folder structures, etc., to make sure that they're fully secure. Copilot, if you're in a Microsoft environment, it can go and search around your folders, it can look at what your documents say, and it can tell you things to help you be more productive. But unless you've got really strong permissions on all of those documents and folders, it might expose information through those AI bots and those AI agents that you don't want exposing. So it's really, really important that you've got that governance around your folders and files, and and are quite sure that somebody's AI agent can't go and interrogate something that you don't want them to. So that's a piece of work that's sort of ongoing for us. Cybersecurity, we know that there's an increase in cyber risks and threats because of generative AI. Phishing emails look more authentic. There are cases of video sort of phishing content, which is similar to the video that Mel shared, where there are people are impersonating other people. All of this is getting cleverer, more sophisticated, and harder to spot. So having that really strong cybersecurity and cyber resilience is increasingly important. And Mel talked a little bit about the EEF trial and looking at sort of lesson planning. We think it's really important that lessons are planned based on a really strong, high quality curriculum. And so we're investing and making sure that our curriculum is really well mapped, that all of the sort of key and core knowledge is really clearly sequenced, because that means that if we want to use AI to help us to build lesson resources or quizzes or things like that, is based on an actually strong core curriculum. I would caution anyone against putting and asking sort of ChatGPT without any context for lessons or quizzes or any other information, because the curriculum is not necessarily our curriculum, or your curriculum, depending on what you're on your setting and on what you've included. So that's really important for us. And then we've been placing some bets. So we've been developing some AI agents, as I think they're increasingly called, not bots anymore, but an AI assistant within Microsoft environment. So we built a bot that helps us to interrogate HR policies that we're hoping to deploy soon, so that teachers and central staff can sort of ask questions of our HR policies really quickly and easily. We're doing the same thing around our curriculum so that you can find things out about the curriculum. But we're doing all of this within our own environment. So we're not having to go out to ChatGPT, and we're not risking our copyrighted information in the wider world. It all stays within our United Learning ecosystem. So we're confident that we're not sharing information that we shouldn't. We're using predictive data insights through a partnership and I'll work with the OEAI, which is a sort of open data infrastructure platform where we're going to be able to deploy more predictive analytics. And the last one, which I think is really critical and something that we can all do, is talking to our EdTech partners. So the software that we buy, the companies that we work with, having really open conversations with them about what's on their product roadmaps, so we understand where they're going to be using AI in future. There's no point building something or trying to develop something in-house if in 6 months' time a partner that you work with, your MIS provider or your finance software, is going to deploy something that's going to save you time that you could be thinking about and planning for based on the work that they're doing. So finally from me, and then hopefully that leaves time for some questions. I thought it'd be helpful to just have a sort of AIA memoir. Some of you will be further along in your journey in terms of thinking about the role of AI in your schools and trusts. But I think having this clear vision for your model of education and how would this affect your view on AI is really critical. So what place do you think it should have within your trust and your school? And then what role do you want to have sort of centrally through your central policies and guidance in sort of policing or managing that? I think that we've been really clear that the space of innovation and what schools are using as tools within the classroom, we're not sort of getting too involved in that other than ensuring that they're safe. What we then want to do is look for the models of excellence and bring those and share that good practice. But we're not going to be making big leaps in saying everyone should be using this AI tool to support maths or science or English. We want that to come bottom up from our schools experimenting in safe ways. I think the thinking about having the governance in place that does keep people safe. I think it's really important to have someone on your teams thinking about this. I think someone in schools should be thinking about this, and you might want to establish a working group so that you've got people who are interested and enthusiastic and are sort of keeping abreast with what's going on, can keep talking about it and sharing what the potential opportunities are. Thinking about its role in staff professional development and in the school curriculum, I think is increasingly important. We've not done as much work on that yet as we'd like to. And I think that then there's this critical point around digital divide. Some of our young people in our schools won't have got access to this technology, and should they, do you want to enable that for them? Some schools might have one-to-one strategies where it's a bit more embedded into how you're thinking about teaching and learning overall. In others, there'll be pupils that don't encounter generative AI at all, and are they being left behind? So thinking about it from an equity perspective, I think, is a really important thing to do as well. So hopefully that's sort of taken some of the context and some of the theory and some of the sort of things to think about and worry about, and put that into a sort of multi-academy trust context to enable you to think about what you might want to do in your own trusts. And I think are we going to have questions?
Yes. We have got 5 minutes left, just about. So, and we have a couple. So I'll just read them out. This is one for you, please, Lauren. Are the HR policy and curriculum resource bots that you're developing at United Learning, is that being done? Is that in-house work, or are you engaging with third parties for that?
That's a little bit of both. So there are good resources out there, although sometimes it's difficult to navigate some of the things that sort of Microsoft publish, but there are some good guidance. There is some good guidance now, and actually since we've done a bit of developing this and with those people on the team who are enthusiastic about doing that, it's been really interesting to see that some of the Copilot agents that you can now deploy and sit onto documents, folders and things like that are actually pretty good. So, I think you don't need to build them. Some of the out of the box tools now are they're a good starting point to decide whether or not you need something that can be fine tuned a little bit more, or whether or not, something off the shelf might get you sort of 80% of the way.
Okay, thanks. Mel, you were nodding along there about some of the Copilot stuff. I know you do a lot of work with that. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, just that they seem to be. I know lots of people were looking at creating their own, but now it seems to be that they're worth a go, worth looking at. I haven't got any on the go at the moment, but I'm just sort of researching some, and they seem to be pretty good.
And are they, the eternal question, do they come as part of a license for Copilot, or can you like pick and choose what you want and you pay as you go?
I think you pay. Definitely pay.
I think there's a little bit of both. So the M365 Copilot that everybody's got now, I think has got more things in it than it did 12 months ago.
Yeah.
And I think, as I said, the sort of the frontier stuff, the more precise tools, the ones that are using better versions of ChatGPT and the other Gen AI models are expensive, and they're at the sort of paid for end. My personal view is that most of the things that school leaders, teachers, etc., might want to engage with are pretty much there in the free version. I think if you want to start using the paid for version of things like Copilot, that they can get very, very expensive very, very quickly on a per user basis, and you'd have to have a really clear rationale for the potential gains that you think you get versus just having the more generic tools available.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm conscious of time. We've just got one more, so we should be good. Another one for Lauren, actually. What was it about the blocked apps that you mentioned that made you block them? And you probably can't go into individual details, but sort of generally.
Yeah, so I think it's our general checks. So the first place I always go when I'm looking at an AI website is who owns this? What country is it based in? I go to the T's and C's, and if they haven't got any terms and conditions, I close the website, and we're not spending any more time talking to them. And if they do have T's and C's, you want to look at where is the data held. So if it is not in an EU or GDPR sort of associate country, I would be cautious because you don't know where that data is. Lots of T's and C's also say that they can move your data without your permission and without telling you. So they might have their data held in the UK now, but they can move it to wherever they like without telling you. I also don't think that's okay. And I've got a general sense of skepticism for anything free, because nothing really is free. So I feel much more comfortable paying a subscription for something where I've entered into a contract with somebody for a product and have some terms and conditions which are a bit more binding than downloading something or using something that's free. So, that's a sort of rule of thumb. There are some great free things, but there are also some pretty awful ones. And I just think it's just that being discerning and really checking what it is that what agreement you're entering into.
Yes, yeah, I think that's probably a good guide for life in general online, not specifically with AI. Okay, we don't seem to have any more questions, so I think we can wrap it up there. I'd just like to thank everybody for attending, thank our 3 speakers for the information they've imparted. I think there was some really interesting and valuable stuff there. If you would like to know more on this topic, we will be publishing more and probably doing more events on it, but feel free to get in touch with questions you might have. And I would also say that Lauren, you are I'm not sure what the term exactly is, but you are on one of the CST's communities that is relevant to this, aren't you? So I'm sure that, there'll be more coming out through that channel as well.
Yeah, that's a data and insight community. So anyone in your trust that are part of that community, feel free to drop me a question.
And I'll just finish by saying, as I did at the start, in case anyone didn't quite join at the start, you will be getting a link to the recording probably early next week. So thank you all very much for attending.